Welcome, Barbra fans. We have a very exciting show for you today for episode 9. When we can, we try to sprinkle in some guests. I mean, I know the internet is saying what we want is more Scott and Matt. Don't worry, it'll just be Matt and Scott next week, but we're going to have a special guest. And as always, I like to let Matt introduce the special guest. So we'll throw it right over to you. How are you doing today, Matt?
Hey, I'm very good, thank you. Yeah, I'm having a good week, even though this is a Monday. Yeah, so today I am extremely pleased to introduce to you. He's an A&R man, which stands for Artists and Repertoire. He's a music publisher. He's a songwriter. He's worked in many genres in the music industry. He's worked with traditional vocalists like the subject of these videos and the subject of my book, like Barbra Streisand. He's worked with classical crossover artists. He's worked in pop, rock, urban, country singers, comedy, children's music, and Broadway cast albums and motion picture soundtracks. He has been an executive producer for Barbra Streisand for many albums. I think his count is up to 27, possibly 28, I guess, if we count Bonsoir. 28 albums for Barbra. He's been the music supervisor for Barbra's live concerts. And he is just an all-around great, friendly guy. You can often catch him during concerts, walking around the front near the stage, saying hi to everybody. Ladies and gentlemen, people of all ages, welcome, Jay Landers.
Hello, guys. How are you? Pleasure to be on your broadcast.
Yeah, it's hard to say. We should have really named the show better, but we're going to name it on the last episode. Okay. So what Broadway casts were you a part of? That was new information to me.
A couple of weeks ago, you interviewed Richard J. Alexander, who I call the Baron of Broadway. And many, many years ago, Richard and Cameron McIntosh were producing a show called Five Guys Named Mo. Mm-hmm. And I thought it was a blast when I went to see it, and I was working at Columbia Records, and I wanted to buy the cast album rights. I wanted for Columbia, and Richard and I produced that record together, and so that was my first foray, I suppose, into the Broadway cast album game. And I can still see Richard like he was like a cheerleader getting the guest audience.
Right.
Be kind of the participants in the call and response songs of the show. And then from there, I went to work at EMI and sort of made it my mission to sign Stephen Sondheim, who I'd met a couple of times through Barbra. And once that started to happen, I was involved in different Sondheim shows, a couple of revivals. A Funny Thing Happened on the Way to the Forum with Nathan Lane.
Oh, I love that one. That's a great one.
That was a fun one. And Passion. And
so good. So that the Donna Murphy version?
Yeah, Company. And a couple of others.
I own all those. I'm so excited about this.
You know, many years go by and there's a couple dozen.
We've got the book that we've got now, which is Barbra Streisand, the music, the albums, the singles, which we want to encourage everyone who's watching this to go out and pre-order at tuckerdspress.com. You know, the book is at the printers right now. It's done. It's turned in. We're just waiting. When those books show up on my front door, I ship them out that day. I'm not waiting till Barbra's birthday, which is when the book comes out. So that's why you want to order from tuckerdspress.com over other places, because you could get that book sooner. And the book has a upcoming writer doing the foreword for this book. You know, it's just this young kid. Matt, where'd you get this young kid to do the foreword for the book?
Well, he may be on this video right now as we speak. Jay Landers wrote the foreword.
Well, Thank you, Jay. You're more than welcome. It was an honor. When I heard about this book, my first thought was, shit, why didn't I write that book? But
Right.
when I found out it was Matt, I was like, well, we defer to the expert. So I
Thank you.
was really excited by it because, so many books, I may be dreaming this up, but a couple of years ago, I, for some reason, had to research something, and I went on Amazon and I found that there were 60 biographies of Barbra, about Barbra, I should say.
Yeah.
And the thing that was, besides the fact that there are 60 books about any one individual, that's impressive on its own. But the thing that was curious to me is that not a single one of the authors ever tried to contact me. And I've got 30 years of memories and experiences with Barbra. And by the way, I have not read any of these books except looking for the little slivers of information that I needed for something. But so I'm not saying that they're good or they're bad. I'm sure they're all well-intentioned. It's just that it seems strange that nobody would reach out. And by the way, they don't reach out to some of her famous record producers like Richard Perry or David Foster. They don't reach out to anybody. It seems like they're all kind of recycling what the previous person wrote.
Well, and what you're saying there.
And my point is, and I'm sorry, and my point is that with the limited time I've spent looking at these books, most seem to focus on the tropes that we all know about her, or we've read about her, perfectionism and this and that and the other thing, but very few focus on her music. And of course, music and acting, but music is what brought her to the party. And so it would be, in my mind, the first thing that people would want to know. So I was thrilled when you took the deep dive into her catalog.
Well, and that's really what I wanted to say, that as a fan, I have not enjoyed any book that's ever been published about her because they're always just a little bit mean, in my opinion, or a little bit gossipy, or focusing on things that aren't of interest to me. She's the greatest singer of all times, period. There should be a book that's paying tribute to that. And Matt's book does it, which I think fans are going to be so pleased that that junk that is constantly put in every book is nowhere to be found in this book.
Yeah. And I've read Matt's website for a long time. It was invaluable in helping me write the liner notes for Bonsoir. But I'm always looking at it, and he's not a pushover. He's not just saying every song she ever sang is brilliant, et cetera, et cetera. If got his opinions, but it's always couched in a respect for her artistry.
And if an album has 12, 14 songs, they're not all home runs, but most of them are. It's so rare that something just is not liked by me.
Okay, so we are going to start with our first album here because it's a big one, and that is Just for the Record. Now, those who've been watching know I always hold up a vinyl. I don't have a vinyl for this because we're in the 90s here. And I've talked to Jay about this. I've talked to Chris about this. I talked to Richard about this, but we want that 90s vinyl box set, all of Barbra's stuff from the 90s. Everything we've covered up to this point has been on vinyl. This needs to come out.
Here's some breaking news. I am in conversations with Legacy about that very subject, about which albums need the vinyl treatment.
And we need them because this is one of the most amazing box sets any artist has ever done. I listen to mine so much that it's falling apart. I don't know if this is showing, but this thing is coming down. I mean, mine has seen better days, okay? Because I listened to this so much when it came out.
Yeah.
Do you know the story behind why she even started to work on this?
this album happens to be the first project that I worked on with Barbra from inception, so to speak. I had met her and worked with her. That's not even true. I had met her through Charles Koppelman and had pitched Charles songs to give to her that she went on to record. But this was the first sort of face-to-face project that we worked on together. And the way it started is that Marty Ehrlichman, it's kind of a good story. I don't know if you want to hear the whole story, but
well, that's what we're here for.
Yes.
Barbra was making the album Till I Loved You.
Yeah.
And she didn't really have an A&R person in her life. So it was kind of the album wasn't coming together quickly. It was like if she found a song, if someone sent her a song, if Quincy Jones sent her a song, it was just kind of coming together, but not in a truly organized way, which was fine. I mean, it's still a lovely album, but she was the record company really wanted her to deliver this album. So a guy, and I was working at Columbia Records as kind of a low man on the totem pole. And a guy said to me, you know Charles Koppelman? And I said, yeah, but they're not working together at the moment. And he said, well, do you think you could find any songs for Barbra? And I had found Coming In and Out of Your Life, and I had found Memory from Cats. And I said, well, let me see. So I found a couple of songs. And I gave the guy the songs, and he said, well, can you come with me to the studio? Because I don't really have that great of a relationship, and I don't know how to picture the songs and all of this kind of stuff. So I was thrilled. I went to the recording studio, and kind of a fast forward.
Well, before you fast forward, are you talking, what songs did you pitch on Till I Loved You? I don't know. You probably didn't see last week's episode, but I love Till I Loved You. I think it's your second best album.
You know, I'd have to go back, and it was a long time ago. I remember one song was called What Were We Thinking Of?
Oh, love that.
Yeah.
Great one.
And it had been, somehow I had learned that the record was somewhat loosely a chronicle of a relationship, followed the arc of a relationship. So What Were We Thinking Of was sort of like, you know, what happened to us kind of song.
Right.
And so that seemed like it would be a good one. Well, the kind of the fun thing of that meeting that I remember is Barbra was in the midst of doing a zillion things, and she shows up and we're sitting there, and she goes, guys, I really don't have time to listen to, and I said, Barbra, you know, you don't know me, but I really think we've got something special here. Just come in and sit down for 1 second. So she's sort of like, oh, okay. She sits down, and this other fellow puts in the tape, and she goes, I don't like it. And I said, Barbra, you know, you're brilliant because you can tell from the tape hiss if you like a song or not. How about listening to at least the first verse? So she listens to the first verse, and she's, I don't like it. I said, well, maybe you don't like it because you're not imagining how you would phrase it. You're just listening to the demo singer. She says, what do you mean? And I said, well, put it in again. So we put the tape on again, and I kind of, I have the world's worst voice, but in my inner ear, I can imagine how she said. So I sort of stretched out the vowels and tried to convey to her the way I would imagine she would phrase it. And she goes, that's pretty good. And who would produce it? And suddenly there was some there. And did wind up recording it. And there was one or two other songs on that album that we went through a similar process with. Anyway, like, what was the time frame between Till I Loved You and Just for the Record? Was it like 5 years or something?
4 years, 87 to 91.
I have no communication with Barbra for all of that time. I'm at Columbia Records, and I get a call from the legendary Marty Ehrlichman. He says, I'm looking for the guy. Barbra remembers a guy who came to her studio and pitched her some songs, and she thought he had a good take on the music and how to talk to her and how to communicate. And
Right.
that's me. And he
You were
said,
the
"Oh,
guy.
and he said, great. She remembered the incident. She didn't remember the name. So we got together. And when we got together, he said, Barbra has been trying for the last few years to organize this life career compilation that's
Mhm,
going to be accompanied by a documentary video.
mhm.
And she's had the title in her mind forever, which is Just for the Record. And they've made some attempts at putting it together. No, that's a good song title. But it hasn't come to fruition. So I said, well, let's sit down. So I sat down with Marty and with Barbra, and I looked at all what they had put together. And I said, okay, give me a moment. I think I have a way in which this could be more organized, because I'm a record buyer as opposed, in addition to just being a record maker, I buy a lot of records. So I said, listen, it really should be sequential, the 60s, 70s, 80s. I believe it stopped in the 80s, didn't it?
Right, right.
And she had already had the idea of bookending it with her young self doing You'll Never Know, and the adult Barbra singing with her child self.
Mhm.
So that was her idea, to bookend the whole thing, whatever it would turn out to be, with that. So that made it kind of easy, because I was working within a framework. And you might think, well, of course, chronologically, that would be the way to go, which it ultimately was. But for whatever reason, there were many other iterations of it before I stepped in and organized it. So on that job, on that project, my job was really helping to organize.
Beautiful.
I mean, you know, it was the age of the box set, and you guys just hit it out of the park, the ballpark. I mean, this is the box set of box sets. This is another configuration of it with the
I mean,
pocket.
Barbra worked day and night on that big booklet that
Here's the small version that was meant to fit on in the stacks.
well, at that
Just
time,
everything was sort of shortened down.
There were probably going to be originally like 5 iterations. One was going to be in a leather bound thing, and one was going to be in, I don't know, satin or whatever it was. All there was many different iterations. And, you know, again, I sort of raised my hand and said, listen, there's got to be one deluxe version, and then one version that fits in the bins that don't carry big boxes. And so that's what it turned out to be quite successful. But unfortunately, the documentary part of it was kind of abandoned. But perhaps it will see the light of day. Update.
Ooh, look at this. We are getting just breaking news after breaking news. My story with Just for the Record, I was working at Arby's, not making a lot of money. And this was a pricey box set. But I was like, I had to have it. But I decided I would buy it for my mom for Christmas. And it would be like, you know, and it didn't come out. Matt, do you remember when it came out? I actually don't. Was it October or something?
September.
September. Okay, so I
September
bought it
24th, 91.
And I said, I'm going to keep this for my mom. You know, I'll save it. I opened it and I listened to it. Never gave it to her for Christmas.
That's funny.
I know. I still have it here. All these years later, mom got like, you know, I don't know, a roast beef sandwich.
You know, one of the most fun parts of this making of this, Just for the Record, was that I sat with Barbra for days on end. It could have been 2 or 3 weeks with my typewriter, not the computer.
Oh,
and I
wow.
interviewed her. So it was like, what was it like to be on the Ed Sullivan Show? And she would say, I was never on Ed Sullivan. And I'd say, yes, you were. Listen. Oh, yes, of course. So, yeah. And so anyway, she would share anecdotes, and that's really how the liner notes, she really wrote them. I typed them.
Right.
I love it. So what we decided to do for this one, we can't just pick one song. We decided we'd pick a song from the 60s, one from the 70s, and one from the 80s. So Matt, you go first. What is your pick from the 60s?
Well, the 60s is 2 discs on this box set, so there's a lot of tracks to choose from. I mean, it's a lot, but I listened to it. Oh, there you go. I listened to it last night. I listened to it last night, and I'm always drawn, and I listen to it all the time. When You Gotta Go, Wee Small Hours, the medley that's at the end of, I think, the first disc. Anthony Newley, of course, wrote When You Gotta Go, and it's Barbra live at the International Hotel, 1969. And I just love that medley. I mean, you know, we got Wee Small Hours in the Morning, you know, decades later on Love Is the Answer, but we've, you know, when You Gotta Go, that's the first time she recorded that, and it's so playful and she's so sexy singing it, and I just love that medley.
Great pick. Jay, what's your...
I know, you, Scott?
Oh, I go. Well, so mine is You Wanna Bet. I had never heard that song when I bought this. I know it's on a 45, and now I do have the 45 of it. So, you know, I've got it somewhere. But her last note on that song is incredible. I know that she holds a longer note on other musical instruments, but I think it's one of her longest, and it's fun to sing in the car. Nobody else wants to hear me sing it in the car, but I like to hold that last note. I love that song. Speaking
of last notes, and I'll go sideways on you for half a second. The last note in Yentl is, tell me the song title again. I'm blanking.
Piece of Sky.
Piece of Sky, thank you. When I listened to that, I said, this had to have been manufactured. They had to have put it on a tape loop or something. But I happen to have had the opportunity to isolate that particular vocal, and that's her. And she just held that note to eternity. And was just remarkable. So I appreciate your liking her long held notes.
Yeah.
I've just taken a look at this. Barbra and I share one thing in common, which is that after these projects are done, we've spent so much time mixing them and mastering them and listening that once the shrink wrap is on them, we don't tend to listen to them again unless she says, I'm going on tour and we need to remind ourselves of certain songs or arrangements or whatever. So I don't have that instantaneous title recognition that you guys have. But when I look at this, every song in the, I'm looking at the booklet now, every song in the 60s, to me, every one of them is a winner. But the one, so I can't really pick my favorite because they're all great. But the one thing that I love listening to over and over again is the Friars Club tribute of legendary songwriters who paid tribute to her. It was such a brilliant thing to do. I'm pretty sure it was Marty Ehrlichman's idea, or he certainly encouraged the event to take place. And when you're talking about Harold Arlen, Julie Stein, Richard Rodgers, each adapting their famous songs and making them about Barbra, and then Don Rickles. Well, we have that tape in its entirety, of course. This is just an excerpt of that tape. And I just thought it was a remarkable thing for these legendary songwriters to celebrate such a young singer, kind of acknowledging that she gave them kind of a new lease on life in a way. She reminded people of their brilliance, and they celebrated her brilliance. And I'm so touched by it, particularly the Richard Rodgers song. So that's my favorite cut from the 60s era of Just for the Record.
I like it. So
that's great.
We will go on to the 70s, and I'll go first on this one. This one it was the hardest pick for me because there are two songs on the 70s that I love so much, and I could have picked either of them, but in the end I went with If I Closed My Eyes. This song is so beautiful, and correct me if this is nowhere, right, Matt? I mean, this isn't on any, so this is a song that's just not on vinyl, right?
Well, it's as a single. It was released as a 45, but it's never been on an album. It was a theme song to her movie, Up the Sandbox.
Right. Yeah, I guess I do have the 45 because the flip side is just the music.
Instrumental, yeah.
So, right. So I guess I do have the 45.
But did it actually appear in the movie?
No.
So it was written for, but ultimately
the theme song, I think it's Billy Goldberg. I could be wrong about that. The theme song's in the movie, but not her vocal. She never sang in the movie.
It is one of her best vocals. I love it. It's so beautiful. Listen to this song on the beach. If you go to the beach, you listen to this song, and you will just dream away. It's a great one.
I always choose a Bergman Legrand song, so I'm going with Between Yesterday and Tomorrow. I just think it's just one of their most sophisticated, existential, to use that word, kind of songs. And I know that it's that life cycle of a woman recording session where Barbra wanted to experiment with standing in the middle of the orchestra, not in the recording booth. So I just imagine her singing this song surrounded by this orchestra and just, singing these beautiful elongated notes to this very existential, what is life between yesterday and tomorrow? There is more. I mean, it just ticks all the boxes for me.
Good pick. What do you got, Jay?
Well, again, as you get to know me, you will understand that my brain works in the most circuitous ways to arrive at what I like, what I like less, etc. I'm not a musician. I can, I tell people I can play the piano if you like the sound of piano played by boxing gloves. Other than that, I could. My latest passion is the ukulele. But I'm not a musician. I can't read music, so I'm always hampered by the way in which I have to communicate my ideas to arrangers. So I can't say put the G over the diminished flat and blah 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 blah. Like in shorthand, I have to go. The way that Burt Bacharach arranged this, well, what was that sound? And can we transfer it to this? It's constantly, but somehow or other, I've survived all these years doing that.
Yes, you have.
The way in which I kind of trained myself about how to make records is from a very young age, I loved collecting demos. So I have probably, I would say 75% of the Beatles catalog, I have the demos of those songs.
Wow.
And so by being afforded the opportunity to listen to the demo and then listen to how far it has gone in terms of development of the arrangement, additional lyrics, thrown out lyrics, et cetera, to the finished song is to me the arc of the process. And I've always found that very interesting. And so today I can almost automatically, I could hear a song that's a polka and imagine it as a ballad because I understand that these are living things that can be changed. So and one of the things that is the greatest thrill, maybe the greatest thrill for me, having had this kind of front row seat in Barbra's creative process, is hearing her sit at the piano with a great arranger or a pianist and kind of work through an arrangement of a song. And it's almost like it's almost like her brain, like you can see the wheels spinning as she's kind of going this way and pulling it this way, and then the piano player pulls her back and she goes no, and it's back and forth. It's really, really interesting. So I wanted to convey that process to the listener. So she had played me this demo of her and Michel Legrand working on What Are You Doing the Rest of Your Life? And then I thought, you know, what'd be great is to kind of show the before and after of it. So I think we used that device on a couple of songs, but you hear Barbra and Michel, and they're kind of doing these vocalese and incredibly complex harmonies that they're making up on the spot. And then at a certain point, we transition into what the finished record sounded like. So I just loved listening to that. This album was not designed to be Barbra's favorite songs or a greatest hits record or anything. It was meant to sort of showcase her artistry in all of its various permutations. So this was a particularly fertile time when she was working with Michel and the Bergmans. And I love the song, of course. It's one of the greatest songs ever written. And her version to me is the ultimate version. So I thought it would be interesting to show the before and after. And that's why that's my favorite song.
That's a good pick. And you know, Matt and I were discussing this on one of the previous shows. Both of us just learned or relearned that Lost Inside of You that's on this 70s is a different version than that's on Memories, which is a different version that's on Star is Born. I don't mean to put you on the spot because I know it was 30 years ago, but do you remember where you found this version of Lost Inside of You that's on this 70s disc?
I'm trying to remember because I'm very familiar with I wasn't a part of the making of A Star is Born, but I'm very familiar with that rendition. I was a part of the album Memories, which in the UK was known as Love Songs. And I know that Charles Koppelman had identified Lost Inside of You as a potential single follow-up to Evergreen. And so they wanted to produce a studio version of it as opposed to the so-called live version of it in the soundtrack. So that's the version that I'm familiar with as a what I would call the studio single version.
Right.
And but I don't recall that there was yet a third version of it. So you're saying that on Just for the Record, there was an entirely different version.
I didn't recall it either. And when Scott mentioned it, I said, God, you know, I haven't listened to the Just for the Record version in so long. Let's do this tonight. And I listened to it. It certainly is different. It may be a different mix, but the vocal, I mean, I haven't, you know,
I'll have to go check that out because it's a great song. And Barbra has a vivid memory of how the song came to be written. And with Leon Russell, and how the dialogue of their writing it together actually became the basis of the dialogue that Christopherson and she spoke in the film.
Yeah.
Now we're going on to the 80s, and we'll let you go first, Jay. We've got the 80s disc on here, which has some great tracks as well. But what do you got from this one?
Gosh, you know, looking at these titles, it's really hard to pick one song. It's a lot of fun hearing the song that they kind of jokingly call The Way We Weren't, which was an alternative end title song to The Way We Were. And as I understand the story, it went so far as the joke became, well, you know, they didn't stay together in the movie. They broke up. So why is it The Way They Were? It should be The Way They Weren't, you know? But as I understand the story, they actually test screened back to back on separate nights, both songs. And the hands down winner, I think it took place it was an out of town location. I don't remember where, maybe Arizona, or it may have been just outside of Los Angeles. I don't remember. But anyway, they had this test screening and the famous song prevailed. And this song Barbra sang at an ACLU tribute to the Bergmans. And I think that was the first time anybody outside of the three of them had heard it. And I think it's a lovely, lovely song. So that would be my choice.
It is a fun one. What do you got, Matt?
I almost chose that too, Jay. But you know, the 80s disc has less sort of unreleased stuff than the other ones do. So, you know, I just love her unreleased stuff. You know, everything else is on an album and we've probably already talked about it, but I'm going to go with I Know Him So Well, which is, you know, they left off the Broadway album because it's from the musical Chess, which wasn't really on Broadway. So Barbra was being a stickler for details in that respect, saying, well, I can't put it on a Broadway album. It's not on Broadway. But it also had a kind of a pop sensibility to it. And it's usually done as a duet between two women. But on this one, she sings with Richard Page. He's a member of the group Mr. Mr., which is a great name of a group.
Yeah.
Mr. Mr. But I just love it. I think it's, you know, it's definitely pop. Who cares? It's a fun song. I love to sing along with it too in the car. So yeah, I Know Him So Well.
Well, you know, it doesn't happen very often around here, but Matt and I have the same pick. I remember this song blowing me away as I listened to this back in when it first came out. As I keep saying, the Broadway album is my favorite album. And for there to be a track that I didn't know from the Broadway album, are you kidding me? And I loved that song. That was my favorite song when I got the box set. And it still is one of my all-time favorites. So I hate to agree with Matt. It breaks my heart, but
it's okay.
So Matt, this is a perfect question for you. And the very reason why people should buy your book.
Yes.
For this kind of information. I'm aware that Barbra, after she recorded the Broadway album, the famous album, she had intended to record an album which she was calling Back to Broadway.
Right.
And so she got together with Rupert Holmes, who she had worked with on Lazy Afternoon and Stars Born, and she recorded a good chunk of a good part of the album. And then for whatever reasons that were going on, I wasn't there at the time, that project was ultimately abandoned.
Yeah.
So and then there was another couple of songs that she recorded with different people, also in kind of a third attempt at making, or a second attempt at making Back to Broadway. And where does I Know Him So Well fall into this cycle of making a Broadway album? And second question is, somewhere in the deep recesses, in the misty color water fragments,
memories and the cobwebs of your mind, or whatever, the corners of your mind.
She did a solo rendition of it as well.
Of I Know Him So Well?
For some reason, I'm thinking that, but I could be wrong.
Okay, well, I don't know about that. I mean, that would be news to me.
Okay.
But I Know Him So Well was definitely for the Broadway album. It was done in the Peter Matt sessions. Although I'm not sure, I don't have the arranger in front of me right now, but you know, the Rupert Holmes, I mean, you guys have released some of that. You've released Glockamora, and but you know, there's she does Moonfall from Rupert's home, Rupert's show, Edwin Drood.
Yes.
She does A Funny Thing Happened on My Way to Love, which is from I Can Get It For You Wholesale, which she did not sing in the show.
Correct.
And On My Own from Les Mis.
Make Our Garden Grow.
You guys brought that out for the concerts.
We did a live version of it. The studio version is, when this thing comes out, I'm making a prediction that it will be in the top 4 greatest recordings she's ever made.
Okay, everyone, that is the end of part 1 with Jay Landers. We only got through Just for the Record, but we actually did have him for 3 more albums, which will be on next week. So keep tuning in and enjoying the show. And as always, make sure you go to tuckerdspress.com to order the Barbra Streisand book, and we'll see you next week.